maybe we don't need so much meat.
I can't eat like that. It's not something I really think about a lot. I don't count calories. I've been plant-based now for 6 years, and why is nobody talking about this?
Oh my God, I have to change everything.
Women, health, and weight loss. Speaking the truth, debunking the myths. This podcast is designed to help you improve your health, lose weight, and achieve your fitness goals. Enjoy!
All right, ladies, we have a treat for you today. Carleigh Bodrug is with us, and she's going to help us understand what it means to go plant-based, how to do it, and we're going to bust some myths that we see commonly questioned in the industry. Welcome, Carleigh. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Super excited to speak with you. I was so looking forward to this. I was like, when is that day coming? Because this girl talks about the food, like I talk about food with passion, and I feel like you help educate people on the biggest myth that I find in this, the healthy food versus yummy food, and we're here to bust those myths. So, Carleigh, why don't we start off by you telling us how you even got to go plant-based? What interests you about plant-based, and when did you make the switch?
So interestingly enough, if you would ask any of my college or university friends whether they would think I'd become a plant-based food blogger, they'd tell you that was crazy because I used to be the unhealthiest eater. Tater tots for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, mini pizzas stocked in my university freezer, lots of alcohol, and I somehow got by. But it wasn't until 2015 that news was announced from the World Health Organization that red and processed meat were now classed as group 2 and group 1 carcinogens. And my dad is a stage 2 colon cancer survivor, so this definitely hit home. And I grew up on a hobby farm, actually, so meat was the mainstay of basically every single meal, as well as cheese. We never sat down for dinner without a big glass of milk. And I remember hearing this news and just being really shocked because we felt like my dad had gone through this massive kind of life-changing cancer diagnosis, surgery, chemotherapy, and then we had continued eating the very thing that could have caused the cancer. Colon cancer specifically is very tied to processed and red meat consumption. So basically from that point, we kind of went down a rabbit hole as a family. I started reading the books like How Not to Die by Dr. Michael Greger and Eat to Live by Dr. Joel Fuhrman, watching the documentaries Forks Over Knives, What the Health. Obviously, you need to take all of these things with a grain of salt, but it was pretty evident to me that a whole food, plant-based diet was not only good for your health in every possible way, but amazing for the planet and the animals. So at the time, I was actually working as a radio host up in Northern Ontario, Canada, living in a bachelor apartment by myself. And I started to kind of teach myself how to cook. And it was very intimidating because you would go on like Pinterest or online and you would search the term vegan and see all these like crazy nourish bowls with like carved avocados and spiralized zucchini. And I was like, I can't eat like that. So I started just kind of like veganizing the food I had grown up eating. So like my mom's bolognese sauce, instead of ground beef, I use lentils. And I thought to myself, there's something here. I felt amazing, like almost immediately. I had been constipated my entire childhood and teenage years to the point where I was prescribed laxatives. And that resolved itself almost immediately when I started increasing the fiber because I was eating more plants. And I just felt great. So I was like, why is nobody talking about this? And I started an Instagram account called Plant You. And I mean, over the years, that was back in 2015, 2016, it has just really exploded. And I'm lucky to now have an audience of well over 1 million, 2 million people who are really interested in eating more plant-based. So that's kind of my story, why I went plant-based. And as you know, when you start eating healthier, you just feel like you want to shout it from the rooftops. So that kind of propelled me forward. And I also enrolled in a holistic health course and got some education there, and am a holistic health coach as well, although I don't necessarily practice in that way.
In that field. What I want to point out is a few things that you said that I feel like are key, because what people typically do when women first come to me for weight loss, we'll talk about, the myth of healthy food versus yummy food, but their biggest scare is, oh my God, like I have to change everything, right? And so one thing that you just said at first is you read an article that you emotionally felt because of your family situation. And that's key for people to understand, because, I just want to be healthier, or I just want to lose weight is just not enough. We actually have to have an emotional reason why we want to make a change. Otherwise, it's just not going to last, right? It's typically not enough to just go off of logic. We have to go off of emotions. So that's one important thing that I wanted to point out. The second thing that you said is, it felt intimidating, right? It doesn't mean that just because I made a choice to change something, it's not going to be super easy and it's not going to be challenging, right? So you were like, oh my God, I have to figure out how to cook. I have to figure out what ingredients to use. Where do I begin? This is overwhelming. I go on Pinterest and there's like a million different things, right? And it can. And I feel like that stops a lot of people, because we feel overwhelmed and we're like, forget it. This is too much. My brain shuts down. It's like, I want to go take a nap, or I want to go eat some bread, right? And so what you said is, because of that emotional reason why you had the support of your family, and they started making changes too, you started with one thing at a time. And that is a key thing. Start with one recipe at a time, and start with your favorite foods. Because one of the key things to make a change is never to feel deprived or restricted. And that sounds like that's what you did. You were like, okay, this is overwhelming. I don't know where to begin. Let me begin with my favorite meal from my mom. And then you do that. And then you observed how you felt. And it's amazing how good and primal and natural it feels to our body to eat that food. And I always say, like, for millions of years, we ate plant-based, we ate the real food. And this processed foods has been around for maybe about 100 years. It's completely new to our body. So our gut doesn't recognize it, our body doesn't recognize it. And we wonder why so many people have inflammation and aches and pains. And anywho, I want to hear more from you. I keep talking to her, but I'm so excited that you're here, and I want to really hear from you. So you said what was the first step you made? So why don't we elaborate a little bit on that? I find that people commonly are confused as to, how do I go plant-based? How do I go vegan? How do I do this and maintain it and not feel overwhelmed and not feel like I failed when I ate something that's an egg or salmon or meat? So what advice can you give to our listeners and viewers?
Absolutely. So you kind of hit the nail on the head there in pulling out kind of that emotional cue that propelled my plant-based journey forward. I always suggest that people start by getting really rooted in their why they're making a lifestyle change. And this could apply to anything, whether you're including more plants on your plate or you've decided that you want to work out more. Why are you doing it? What is the reason? And I mean, that's going to keep you going when things get hard, right? So that's the first thing for sure. The second thing is to not take on too much at once. It's really kind of stigmatized in the vegan community that you should go like vegan overnight. That's the last thing that I recommend to people, unless you're like super motivated and that's what you're set on doing. I suggest taking an audit of what you typically eat in a week and seeing how you can make some simple plant-based swaps within that. So perhaps you start your day with a coffee and a creamer, try a plant-based creamer instead. Perhaps you have like a glass of milk with your dinner at night, swap it out for almond milk or any of the like 100 different plant-based milk brands and try that instead. Again, kind of like you love pasta with bolognese sauce, maybe try some lentils or a veggie ground. So it's not about kind of like overhauling everything at once. Making these small, subtle changes, you'll notice a positive a positive change in yourself, and you'll want to do more. And it's kind of like a snowball effect. You don't want to like shock your entire cooking system and everything by trying a whole bunch of new recipes on top of the changes that you're already making. So making those sustainable changes over time are going to have the biggest impact. I tell people not to stress about social situations, because that, I think, is one of the hardest part of making any lifestyle changes, is the feeling of kind of judgment or being left out. If the one thing holding you back from not going plant-based is like enjoying sushi once a month with your friends and family, enjoy the sushi for as long as you feel like you need to, and eat plant-based the 90% of the time, because it's the 90% that matters on all levels, from both your health, the animals, and the planet, rather than that kind of like 10%. And don't beat yourself up. There's no wagon. Like, you're not getting on a wagon, getting off a wagon. When you decide to go plant-based for whatever reason, there's so many reasons. This is like a for life lifestyle change. So I never suggest that people look at it as like a diet, because it's really, really not.
Oh my God, this is why I was like waiting to talk to you, because you speak my language. I'm all about, I have something that I call SCA with my clients, and it's small, consistent action. And like each week we make one simple goal. Like, you want to drink more water? Great. Like, a goal is 1 extra glass of water a day. That's it. Because it takes time to figure things out. It takes time to figure out which glass works. Maybe this bottle works, but this glass didn't work for me. Maybe I want to have it in the morning, not in the evening. Like, it takes time to figure this out. And then, of course, how our brain is wired, if it's too much of a change, we run on 95% subconscious. So in 5%, we decided, hey, I want to make this lifestyle change. I'm going to start working out 5 days a week. I'm going to go plant-based. And then the brain's like, no, we're not going to do that. And then we feel like we failed. So one huge thing that you just said is, you create your own rules. You create how fast you want to do it. I know people who took a year to go vegan, right? Like, it takes time to figure it out. It takes time to learn about nutrients, right? Like, there are people who, and the faster you go, I feel like it's the worse it is, unless you've studied it for a really long time, because it takes time. It takes time to analyze how your body feels, what goes well with you, what doesn't go well with you, and again, how not to feel deprived or restricted. I love that because it's so simplified. And, I feel like people get scared when you say a lifestyle change, but if you do it one step at a time and you start sticking with that change, and like you said, social, if that's bringing stress, then that's your rule. I typically eat plant-based. I don't eat meat unless I'm in a social situation. And that can be tough. I come from a fitness background, and when I was competing, we had to make and measure, and it was obsessive. We had to measure our food, and wherever I went, if I wanted to socialize, I had to take my food. Now, I was in fitness, so the judgment and the comments didn't bother me as much, but typically people, especially women, can be really bothered by the judgment and the comments and, oh, what do you eat? Like, we get really sensitive to somebody trying to figure that out, or trying to question what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we typically take it personally, which we shouldn't. So I love how you're taking this, guilt and shame off of, women's back, saying, you choose what you want, you choose how often you want it, you implement it slowly, and it takes that pressure off. I love that. How long did it take you to complete? Do you eat meat at all?
No, so I am completely vegan now, but it definitely took me at least a year to completely eliminate animal products. So that includes like cheese, milk. Milk isn't freaking everything. So it was even the education, like from a standpoint, you pick up something and there's all different words for milk these days, and the education of knowing what is vegan and what is not. And I did it in a tiered way, not intentionally, just I think it worked for me. I gave up red meat first, and then chicken, pork, the rest of the meat. I never ate fish, so that wasn't a boundary, but a lot of people give up fish last. And then I gave up the dairy products, which is the most difficult for most people. So it was definitely like a journey. And one thing I wanted to point out is, from a health perspective, a lot of people struggle when they first go vegan, because 95% of the North American population are fiber deficient. And this was definitely something that I was struggling with my entire 1-year-old to 25 years old. Fiber deficiency, like constipation, feeling groggy, feeling weighed down. 95% of us, meanwhile, we're so focused on protein. And in reality, the cases of protein deficient, it's basically non-existent unless you have a unique health condition. So unlearning some of these things was a huge thing. And then also introducing fiber to your diet can be tumultuous because you've spent your entire life not having fiber, and then all of a sudden you're eating things like greens and beans, and cruciferous vegetables, which are like the most fibrous foods in the world. It's no surprise that your gut and your digestive system is going to be like, what the heck? You might have gut pains, etc. So this is kind of another tick in the hat of why you should go slow when you're making these changes so that they're sustainable and healthy over time. Your gut health will adjust, and you will reap the benefits in so many ways in terms of feeling lighter, being regular, sustained weight loss, but it does take time.
Oh, absolutely. And oh my God, like you just, like, I just love you so much. Like all the stuff that you're saying, I'm like, I just want to hug you because it's just, it's unlearning these myths. Like one of the, I'm in weight loss industry. I fight these myths every day. Like you have to count calories and, artificial sweeteners. I'm like, no, it's all about the gut health and understanding that it may get a little worse before it gets better because all these toxins have to get out. They have to get out through the skin, in the bathroom, through the breath, through like whatever way they can, they're going to try to get out. And people freak out. They're like, oh my God, my skin is breaking out. And it's like, that's actually because the toxins are leaving your body, right? Like give it a little bit of time. And like you said, if you just bombard your body with fiber, all of a sudden you're going to be like, I can't eat beans, I can't eat this. And it's not true. If you introduce it slowly, your gut has to be reintroduced to the healthy gut bacteria. And I always say, our body knows how to heal. Our body knows how to do these processes. Our body knows what to do with the real food, and what we supplied is not real. I don't even call it food. I teach my clients to call it unhealthy food and not the, junk food, because we don't even hear the terms junk food or, I say, just call it unhealthy. If you call it unhealthy food, it just has a different meaning to it. But if you just start slowly and observe the body's changes, I feel like that's the body's way of communicating with us, and that's another thing that I want to mention is taste buds, right? If I just start changing everything, if I in one day change how I eat, I can't even taste the food. Like people who are eating fast food and processed foods all the time cannot taste everything in what I call real food, right? Like spices and herbs, especially, like it's so foreign to us. And like you said, milk isn't everything. Sugar isn't everything. Processed sugar and artificial sweeteners. It's like you have to figure out what to substitute it with, how to find a way that works for you while making a change. And I love that you said it took you over a year to make the complete change, but you had a goal, you had a vision, you had your reason why you wanted to make the change. You did it one step at a time, not overwhelming yourself, figuring out, I'm sure you had meals that you made that you were like, oh, this is not going to work, right? But, that doesn't mean giving up. That doesn't mean that the whole healthy food is tasting bad. It's just like, hey, this didn't work. Let's go to the next experiment. I love that. One of the other misconceptions that I find is around soy. So I know you're the expert. So why don't you talk about the soy and what you find people are confused about and what you would like them to know?
This is probably like the most common question I get asked on Instagram is people saying, oh, I heard soy is estrogenic and it's not good for you and you shouldn't be eating it. And I mean, that's one other thing I wanted to mention is when I first went plant-based, like tofu was terrifying to me. Like I was like, I cannot eat this white block of tasteless weirdness. And it's so interesting now because I'm obsessed with tofu now. So like just the shift in palate over the years because of what you're eating, it's so real. Anyways, there's huge misconceptions about soy, and it kind of dates back to a study that was done on rats in soy, and I guess it had some potential negative outcomes on the rats, but it in no way applies to humans. Here's an example. Soy has been one of the most highly consumed foods in Asian populations for centuries. And these are some of the longest living individuals, the thinnest individuals, and only more recently when American food has been popularized in places like China, has health outcomes started to get worse in these countries. So soy is actually considered one of the most studied and health promoting foods in the human diet. So you do not need to be concerned about soy. It's not estrogenic. It has a different, I'm not going to try and act like I know the scientific terms for this, but it has a different estrogen than the estrogen present in the human body. It is not a concern whatsoever, and actually increased soy consumption is linked with a reduction in breast cancer. So not only is it an amazing source of protein, it's low calorie, it has really impressive health outcomes, and it also is a really rich source of plant-based protein. It is also entirely versatile for a meat substitute in your diet. I mean, we eat it multiple times a week, including my fiance who runs marathons, and I promise you there's been no negative health outcomes. So that's a word on soy because it's like crazy. And if you want to delve more into that topic, I actually interviewed a doctor on my channel busting soy myths on my podcast. It's called The Plant Pod, literally all about soy, the whole 35-minute episode. And he speaks more eloquently about the science and the impact on the human body, but it's not something that you need to be concerned about whatsoever.
You know, one thing that you mentioned at first was that you read Eat to Live, one of my favorite books. And he mentions, statistically, how in Asian countries, which are very much soy-based countries, the rate of breast cancer is minimal, almost non-existent, until women move to United States when it equals out with the population, which is a perfect example how it's our environment, it's our lifestyle that determines our health, really, and that we have to take control back. What's your thoughts on GMO versus non-GMO? So, because most soy in the United States tends to be GMO.
So there's two different perspectives on this. I saw Dr. Michael Greger speak one time, and he was saying from a baseline health perspective, as an average person, the last thing you should be concerning yourself with is GMO, non-GMO, and organic versus non-organic. Eat more plants, get them on your plate however you can. So that's what I would say about that is like, don't stress yourself out until you're like level 10 plant-based, really wanting to take your health to the next level. I would say don't worry about things like that. At that point, if you can pick non-GMO soy and that's accessible to you, why not? But I wouldn't overly concern yourself. And then from a GMO perspective, like so much of our produce is genetically modified and we don't even realize it. And that's not necessarily always a bad thing.
We have to be very careful with that word. I feel like, I'm totally against what food industry does, and I speak on that a lot. And one of the things that I feel like they do is they have a lot of the terms that confuse people more and make them focus on the wrong thing. Like you said, let's focus on plant-based. Don't worry about GMO just yet. We're going to worry about that later. Because if people start worrying about GMO and this and that, and it's like overwhelmed, I'm going to go back to how it was.
Exactly.
But one of the things about GMO is we have to, I tell people, question everything. Question what we're talking about right now. Go ahead and do your research. Question it. Because ultimately, we have to choose what we believe is best for us and our families, right? Like that's the empowering part, not us telling you what to do. We're just trying to educate you and make you question things. And one of the reasons is, I'm cautious about GMO stuff, but I'm cautious what it means and what stems behind it. Because broccoli is technically a genetically modified food because it doesn't exist naturally. It's actually combined from I think cauliflower, and I forgot what else, it was mixed. So you can classify broccoli to be GMO, but then what does that really mean? So I feel like this is why people need to simplify it and not worry about that just yet. When you, like you said, when you are at a level and you're level 9 or 10 and you're like, I'm going to take it another level, you do your research and you decide what GMO means, who's producing it, where's it coming from. You can do a lot of research on that and then determine what do you believe is best. I love what you just said about soy because, I remember, oh my God, it's been probably 20 years ago. I started when I would go to Starbucks and I would get my coffee and I asked them to start switching with soy milk. And I remember the first time I tried, I was like, this is interesting, but I started loving it. But then I would start, hearing people talk about, thyroid and soy and this and that. And, again, I feel like if we question things, who's giving us the information, what's happening all over the world, let's look at the countries where that's typically eaten. But let's not look even just at that, right? Their lifestyle is about being calm, drinking tea, taking time in nature, right? That's something that we as, Americans don't necessarily practice every day unless we start taking control back and start doing these things, which I believe go hand in hand with what you and I are just talking about, healthy lifestyle overall. It's not just about what we eat. It's about what we put in our mind, the types of information, the types of things that we see, the things that we watch for entertainment, right? How much time do we spend in nature? How much time do we spend with just ourselves? I feel like food is the first step. To me, in my experience and with my clients, I feel like that's the first step to clearing and freeing your brain to start thinking clearly without sugar addiction, and then start changing from there. So I feel like, to me, food would be the first step toward the changing life. So what are some other ways that you noticed your life has changed as you went plant-based and completely made the transition? Is there anything else for you or your family?
Definitely. I mean, it's been 5 years and my weight has stayed exactly the same. I think I lost maybe 5 pounds when I went plant-based, and it's just been effortless in terms of weight maintenance. And I'm very lucky in that I haven't ever massively struggled with my weight. So I don't want to act like I'm an expert in that field, but I find when you switch to whole unprocessed foods and you can eat in abundance without tracking calories, because when you look at calorie density of even something like a piece of cheese, a small piece of cheese would be 150 calories. And then a bucket of broccoli is going to be 150 calories. So because of the increase in fiber and the increase in nutrient density versus calorie density, I just find it very effortless to maintain weight. It's not something I really think about a lot. I don't count calories. And I don't get caught up in that sort of thing. So that's been great. And I hear from a lot of people that when they go whole food plant-based, they experience the same thing. My skin, I rarely get breakouts now. So that was really nice. Dairy is a huge culprit. If you're struggling with your skin, it might be something to look at is cutting dairy from your diet, because it's a massive culprit of inflammation. So that was awesome. Definitely the constipation thing was huge. I know it's all women here, but struggled with that all my life. And nobody ever thought to say, could it be the fiber or what you're eating? It was like, oh, let's just prescribe laxatives to a 13-year-old. So that was a huge thing. I mean, completely alleviated those symptoms. Yeah. So in every way from a health perspective, I saw dramatic, really positive changes, which is really what ignited this fire in me to really talk about it. And then just from a base level, I think when you go vegan and you start becoming more in tune with kind of the world around you and what's going on and feeling more kind of spiritually connected. And I don't want to get too woo-woo there, but I went plant-based initially for health, but definitely now feel inclined to continue continue eating vegan for the animals, for our planet, and for the amazing health benefits.
I have a little story about that, a confirmation, I should say. Every time, every single client that I've worked with, when we start eliminating processed foods slowly and start substituting with healthier choices, their mood changes. Like I have a 61-year-old client that messaged me there and they said, I've never felt happier. And I don't remember the last time I felt this happy. And it's literally, we just started eliminating these things. But one thing that happens is they all start questioning their consumption of meat, which I find very interesting because to me, it was the same thing. It was like, for me, it was actually drastic. I literally woke up one day and I was like, I can't stand it. I can't smell it. Now, this was years ago. And from that point on, I did occasionally eat some chicken. I still eat some salmon on occasion. But it's really rare for me. And I feel like maybe that's when I'm not eating enough because because when you start eating real food, you're not dependent on food. And some days you eat a lot, some days you don't eat enough. Like your body just kind of guides you to tell you what you need. And I just find that interesting that everybody starts questioning the amount of meat that they're eating. And I feel like your body just starts giving you signals like, maybe we don't need so much meat, and dairy, same thing with dairy. And, one thing that, I remember years ago hearing someone, I think, it was some movement around animals. And the person said, we're eating the animals' fear. And I didn't get that. It didn't resonate with me. I was like, what do you mean we're eating their fear? But this is what resonates with me. And this is what I've been telling people. You eat what the animal ate. Right? So not only that you eat what the animal ate, like there's no way around that. It's not like you're going to get healthy meat from an animal that just ate crap, right? Like their cells of their body are made out of what they ate. So there's no way around that. The second thing is, we talk about stress a lot. And one of the things is if the animal was not treated right, that means they were in high stress environment all the time, which means the stress hormones were elevated at all times, such as cortisol, such as adrenaline, right? Like many others. And that is what their cells are made of. And that is what we essentially eat. So, I just want, if people hear something like, well, we need to care about the treatment of the animals, and that doesn't necessarily resonate with them at the moment, because typically people are like, what's in it for me, right? Well, if you're eating the meat from an animal that was not treated right, like you're eating a whole lot more than you think you are, and we still think we're eating the food how it was 100 years ago, like when a person had their own cow and their own milk, and that was completely different, right? Like nowadays, this mass production kind of screwed up everything, really, and that's why we are having so much inflammation and things. And one thing that you said about constipation, and so many people struggle with that. So many people. When I had a fitness studio, I would have women come to me for consultation, and they would be like, "Well, I didn't go to the bathroom like 5 days." And I'm like, okay, that's kind of alarming. And they would say, well, no, that's just normal for me. And I would say, that's not normal. That's your body's way of communicating with you. But like you said, you're 13, you go to a doctor, they give you a laxative, you don't question it. That's what I'm saying. Like, let's start questioning everything. Let's start questioning why going plant-based. Why are so many people changing the way they're eating? Why is the cancer rate different in Asian countries versus United States and so on? Amazing. So let me ask you, do you ever miss meat and dairy?
Not these days, because I've been plant-based now for 6 years, and I've just replaced all of these things with amazing, better plant-based versions. And my taste doesn't even, like, once you're away from it, your taste buds adapt. And now, like, a vegan cashew cheese is so much more appealing to me than a dairy. Like, the thought of actually consuming dairy, like especially a glass of milk, makes me nauseous. And that's not to like crap on anyone's food. That's just me, because I've been away from it for so long. So no. Like, there's also so many amazing brands that are coming out all of the time with plant-based renditions of foods. You don't want to go crazy over them. They're processed. But if you really need like a burger fix or something, I can tell you that the plant-based burgers these days are really no different than the meat in both texture and look and mouthfeel. So I not at all. Like, if somebody put something in front of me and said, go here, have at it, it's not appealing at this point.
Absolutely. I went through this period of like, I feel like it's a part of the brain that still needs to catch up with what's going on. And it's like, I don't eat meat anymore. I don't really like it. I don't like the smell of it anymore. Like, it changed so much for me. And then I see it in front of me, and I'm like, well, let me just taste it. I don't know which part of the brain that comes from, but it's like the rebel or something. I don't know. And then I would taste it. I'm like, oh my God, this is a good reminder why I don't eat it anymore. And again, like you said, it's not to, crap on anyone's food. It's just that your taste buds change so much. You change so much. What you want changes, but that's when you go slowly. If we just jump into it, that won't work. That just won't work. Carleigh, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. You are so knowledgeable. I love what you're talking about. I love your energy and everything about you. Tell our listeners and viewers where they can find out more about you and where they can follow you.
Absolutely. So my handle is PlantYou, PlantYou, on basically everything. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, plantyou.com. I also have a cookbook called Plant You coming out February 15th, 2022. If you're looking for some plant-based recipes, it has 140 beginner-friendly recipes. So that might be helpful for some of you, and you can find that anywhere books are sold. And yeah, I'm looking forward to connecting with more of you. And I'm so, so grateful that you had me on. This was such a great conversation.
It's been a pleasure. Absolutely. We must do this again. All right, everybody, you heard from the expert, from someone who's done it herself. You've heard it, and it just confirms what we talk about here. And that's self-care, prioritizing your health, taking care of your mental health, typically starts with what we eat and every bite that we take. And not to overwhelm yourself, just start with one day at a time, one meal at a time, one glass of water at a time, one creamer at a time. Pick one and stick with it. And when that sits well with you, then move on to the next one. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.
You just listened to another episode of Women, Health, and Weight Loss with Lex Foucault. You can find us on YouTube or join our free Facebook group. It's called Women, Health, and Weight Loss. There you can ask questions, join our lives, and participate to learn more. That's all, folks. Have a fantastic day.